To paraphrase Leo Strauss, the root of evil, the root of all evil, is the elimination of the difference between good and evil. Our next guest, Professor Daniel Mahoney, is professor of politics at Assumption College. He still has hope that Western civilization can be salvaged, that is, that the resources for renewal are with us if we choose to access and deploy them. His new book, The Persistence of the Ideological Lie, The Totalitarian Impulse Then and Now, which releases on Tax Day, of all days. The Persistence of the Ideological Lie. Professor Daniel Mahoney, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dan.
So the ideological lie is what?
Well, the ideological lie is fundamentally the view that human nature can be radically changed, that as you put it very nicely, that the distinction between good and evil can be replaced by a view that the fundamental distinction relevant for politics and human life is a distinction between progress and reaction. You know, there are those people who are on the side of history who are working to transform the human condition, and then there are those who resist that, who have to be jettisoned or put aside to create a better future. And one of the arguments I make in the book is that the ideological lie, so defined, not only continued after the seeming collapse of communism, European communism in 1989, but it radicalized so that we didn't learn that lesson. And so we had new forms of what I also call the totalitarian impulse manifest themselves. And we really have to learn this lesson. We have to understand exactly why the terrible tragedies of the 20th century unfolded. We have to learn, it wasn't just dictatorship versus democracy or the planned economy versus the market economy, as relevant as those distinctions are, but it was a radical. What was at stake was a sort of radical project to get rid of the human condition and replace it by another false reality. And, whenever you have ideologies that say they know with certitude who the evildoers are and who the victims are, you're in the realm of the ideological lie. You know, you're not seeing the struggle between the drama of good and evil in each human heart as the fundamental reality. You're seeing there's a small group of exploiters, victimizers. We know who they are, and if we get rid of them or we cancel them or we send them to the gulag, all will be well. So that's the structure of the ideological lie. And it's really had taken different forms from the French Revolution on, but it's even if wokeness is now being resisted and challenged in a way, let's say it wasn't in the summer of 2020, it's not going away. It's deeply institutionalized in large parts of the culture, educational world, entertainment world, and politics too.
Well, and our mediating institutions, K through 12 schools, and obviously the campus and the arts. I mean, so that to me, we've been talking a lot about this over the last 80 days of the Trump administration, which is the executive orders and what Trump is doing in contravention to identitarianism. Those are all great things, but the battle is not necessarily being won at the state and local level in a lot of places, as the ideology persists, and so do the policies. The resistance is still very strident, and so when you talk about the resources are there to sort of combat the ideological lie that you describe, what are those resources you're referring to?
Well, I think the beginning of wisdom is understanding. I mean, we can't fight a deep-seated pathology unless we know what it is. And, there was, I believed it was, Supreme Court Justice has said about obscenity, he knows it when he sees it. Most people have that attitude. Yeah, Potter Stewart. Many people have that attitude about ideological fanaticism. Well, they sort of know it when they see it, but that's not good enough. We have to understand exactly what the syndrome is, why it is so corrupting. And I'd say about identitarianism, for example, which is one, I sometimes call it the new racialism, which is one powerful manifestation of the ideological lie today. One of the things that's so horrific about it is it denies the civic and moral agency of so-called victims. And so people of color, as they're now called, are said to be, things can never improve in the United States. They lack the basic freedom of will or moral agency to make a difference in their own lives. That mode of thinking is an invitation for despotism, because a small, ideologically enlightened elite are the only people who are able to, understand what other people don't understand and act accordingly. So, I think you're absolutely right, too, about there was euphoria, if you read the center-right media, let's say November, December 2024. Wokeness is over, the new era has begun, and I think you're exactly right. I think much of this is deeply ingrained in the institutions of civil society. And I should add one more paradox. The classic model of totalitarianism thinks of totalitarianism as emanating from the state and oppressing the institutions of civil society. But what we've seen with wokeness and identitarianism and the new racialism is a totalitarianism emanating from civil society. Mm-hmm. From all those intermediate institutions you mentioned, and increasingly allied with coercive, despotic elements within government. And now not having the government in the hands of those who are going to aid the forces aid the totalitarian impulse within civil society is, of course, a major step forward, and a most welcome one indeed. But what we also need is a reformation of civil society, and that's going to come in part with understanding precisely what the problem is and acting upon it. And but complacency and the idea that this can all be solved by winning national elections is, I think, false. I mean, it's a step forward. These executive orders that you referred to are largely quite welcome, but we still have powerful elements in the United States who are committed to an essentially totalitarian ideology. I mean, we don't live in a totalitarian country, but we live in a country where the totalitarian impulse is deeply ingrained in civil society and in certain elements of government.
We saw this in the UK recently. I mean, UK is farther down the road, but not necessarily that much further. I mean, if you have some if some electoral outcomes are different, and if institutions are feeling like they have free run, I mean, it could be very much like this episode here. This is I've got a clip of it. It's a police officer in the UK coming up to speak to an elderly man about something that he allegedly said. Take a listen.
If you do, that would be really handy for us. But apparently during some conversations between yourself, apparently you've alleged, we weren't here, so I don't know you said it, but you've alleged to say, speak English, or what's that effect?
Speak clearly.
Speak clearly.
No,
okay.
The gentleman's partially deaf.
Yeah, he can speak clearly. Yeah.
So I couldn't even hear him.
No, and that's fine, and that's why we've just come to speak, because potentially someone could perceive that as a hate crime.
Did we just know this was going to happen?
No, I know.
People, if someone says to me, officer, I believe this, then we need to look at it, because someone's potentially reporting to me.
So if a guy can't understand another guy and he says speak English, if that guy takes that as having any sort of racial or ethnic tinge, number one, it could be a hate crime, but whether it's considered a hate crime or not, it draws the attention of local police. I mean, this is East Germany stuff here. And we say, well, the UK doesn't have the First Amendment protections. Yeah, well, those protections are well documented on paper, but they're hard won and protected in practice, even in America.
Yeah, and by the way, England has never had a written constitution. It was also the home of modern liberty, of modern constitutional government. It was the first meaningful civil society and liberal democracy, and so
Look at it now.
I mean, Keir Starmer, and who's really an ideologue at heart, and what he's pursuing is a policy of criminalizing dissent. I mean, there's something deeply and profoundly Orwellian about the very notion of hate crimes, because they're linked to thought crimes, and they're arbitrary. You know, people can simply say, it's like the Maoists on our campuses, and after George Floyd, who just decided that anything that made them feel uncomfortable was needed to be ended or repressed, and that's an atmosphere completely incompatible with the pursuit of wisdom or liberal education. But imagine in the country, we've had many documented cases of people being approached by the police or even arrested for various thought crimes, especially in Scotland, where there was a hate crime law that was interpreted in an extremely Orwellian way. There have been people simply doing silent prayers within the vicinity, the broad vicinities of abortion clinics, who've been arrested in all of this. And
and it speaks to, you know, the people who are part of the quote unquote cancel culture, which I think is actually quite euphemistic. I mean, they have the same impulses as those Orwellians across the pond. They're just not sort of at the same place with respect to political power, not yet, at least.
Well, I think that's right. And one of the differences between the American system and Great Britain is we're still, at least in principle and somewhat in practice, a federal republic, increasingly centralizing one, but still a federal republic. And whoever wins a parliamentary election in Great Britain more or less can do what they will. Now, the constraints on that were not constitutional separation of powers. Constraints on that were, you know, inherited law and practice, certain traditions of civility and restraint and all that. And that's why I would say that, you know, with the Labour government in England today, it's deeply committed to what I call the ideological project. It knows exactly who the purveyors of hate are, exactly who the exploiters in society are. And, you know, for the left, and this is now an international phenomenon, democracy has very little to do with self-government or fundamental rights. It has to do with a set of prescriptions and prohibitions held by the left that redefine democracy. So uncritical support for abortion on demand, for example, or trans ideology, or an obsessive racial consciousness, et cetera. That's what democracy is. And one doesn't have the right to quarrel with those ideological claims or to vote the parties who represent them out. And we're going to see the inevitable outlawing of the AfD in Germany. We're on top of events in Romania and France and elsewhere. We're really seeing what the French political thinker Pierre Menant calls the fanaticism of the center. These parties claim to be mainstream democratic parties, but they have no principled commitment to either fundamental liberties or democratic self-government. I think that's true of at least a very major wing of the Democratic Party, and that's why if the election had gone differently in 2024, we're likely to have moved much closer in practice to this faux democratic model represented by Labour Party in England. By the way, a lot of this stuff is tolerated by the Conservatives in England too, and that's one reason why they lost badly, is because they had ceased to be a meaningful conservative and pro-democratic party.
Daniel Mahoney is professor of politics at Assumption College. The new book, The Persistence of the Ideological Lie, the totalitarian impulse then and now, The Persistence of the Ideological Lie. Professor Daniel Mahoney, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
A great pleasure, Dan. Take care.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
You never want to miss one of life's most important moments. A graduation, a birthday, a first communion, a wedding. When these moments happen, you want to make sure to capture them so that you and your loved ones can remember them for years to come. For over 30 years, families have relied on Tom Kaloran photography to capture important life moments. This locally